Welcome to the Growth Ventures podcast, the go-to platform for entrepreneurs, innovators, and changemakers. I'm your host, Hamlet Azarian. In this podcast, we delve into the world of business, technology, and innovation. We bring you conversations with industry leaders, disruptors, and visionaries who are shaping the future and making a difference. So whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply a curious listener, join us on the journey of learning and growth. Welcome to the Growth Ventures podcast. And now, let's delve into today's episode. Welcome to the Growth Ventures podcast, where we delve into the realms of business, technology, and innovation. I'm your host, Hamlet Azarian. Today, we have the privilege of hosting Sunil Gunderia, Chief Innovation Officer at Age of Learning, a company that has been a transformative force in the educational technology landscape. Before we delve to our conversation, we would like to pay our respects to Doug Dohring, the visionary founder of Age of Learning, who recently passed away. Doug's unwavering commitment to improving the lives of children worldwide and his pioneering spirit have left an indelible mark on the field of education. His legacy continues to inspire and guide those who are devoted to transforming education. Sunil, who had a close relationship with Doug, joins us to share his insights and innovative work at Age of Learning, the evolving landscape of educational technology, and the lasting impact of Doug's vision and leadership. So let's begin our enlightening conversation. Thank you, Sunil, for joining us today. Really appreciate for you being here and taking the time and kind of not only talking about Doug's legacy, but also your impact as well in the field of education and tech as a whole. Can you share an instance where Doug's leadership and vision had a profound impact on a project or direction at Age of Learning?
Sure, Hamlet, and thank you for having us today. It's really great to be able to talk about Age of Learning and this indelible impact that we have because of Doug's vision. And, Doug started it with something that a lot of people thought couldn't be done, and that was the creation of ABCmouse. And, the story goes when he decided he had successfully sold Neopets to Nickelodeon and Paramount, and he could have just, gone off into the sunset. Instead, he came back to his team and said, all those learnings of how we can engage kids in actually learning beyond what was being done in Neopets. How can we use that? How do I start a new company that really helps all kids? And that was what became ABCmouse. And, the story goes that, investors, despite Doug's success as an entrepreneur, weren't interested. And Doug and the founding team invested their own money and said, let's go do this. And he invested 4 years of time before launching the product and getting it to success. And since then, 50 million children worldwide have used ABCmouse, and it has really shown what can be done with digital resources for young children in terms of moving the needle, in terms of helping them not only with academic skills, but really embrace the love of learning. And that to me is something that is a really unique attribute of Doug in terms of having the vision for that and then executing on it with the team that he has and has built since.
That's amazing. And how did Doug approach leadership, influence, and culture and mission of Age of Learning? So what are some things that have allowed for you guys to take big bets like that, right? So early on, you guys took a 4-year bet and said, hey, we're going to build it right. We're going to build the right product. And now look at the lasting impact that it has had. What are some other ways that when you look at his leadership and guidance has allowed not only Age of Learning to grow, obviously, but some argue you guys help spur EdTech, right? As where it was to where it is today now.
Certainly. And we have heard help spur EdTech. It didn't really exist in terms of a field that was where people felt like you could be successful from a consumer perspective because there's so many free resources available. And there were so many free resources available when ABCmouse was launched. And what Doug strived to do with our company and with our product was we got to do it right. It's for kids. And where there weren't specific skill sets, the founding team did not come out of education. They went out and got the leaders in education, early education, Dr. Rebecca Palacios, who is the first Latina in the Teachers Hall of Fame, had taught for 35 years in Corpus Christi. She came on board really early because Doug was like, look, we need leaders in the educational field that really know what kids need and know a lot about kids. And we can create engaging content. We have that experience from Neopets, but how do we blend that so that we get the outcomes that we need? And that was really a big part of his focus, was bringing in the right talent that could be additive to achieving the mission he had, which was to ensure academic success for all kids.
That's amazing. And how did he do that? Like, how did he at the time? Because I remember, by the way, I remember Neopets. I remember also another company Doug was semi-involved with called Speedy Click or Smarty Click. Like, I remember these companies back then. This is when I was going to USC. I was studying business and entrepreneurship. It was like right around the first dot-com bubble. And then obviously right after that, things settled down. And, this is roughly the time frame we're talking about all of these things. Was it easy to convince the early team to join on the vision of kind of trying to build a whole new category, a type of education, or were there some like overall challenges that, to keep on reinforcing that, no, this will work, this is kind of additive, this will have a lasting impact, this is a better way or a newer way of, providing education to kids that now when we look back on it, like I look at my children, like I look at my son and I look at most kids and families, this is almost common. Like, what do you mean you're not using ABCmouse? Or what do you mean you're not watching YouTube videos and so on and so forth?
So, the great thing we all remember about Doug is just his desire for impact and purpose were so infectious that you put him in the room with anyone and he would convert doubters into believers very quickly, and that is how he not only got Dr. Becky to join us, but also Kimberly Oliver Burnham, who was a Teacher of the Year, one of the first kindergarten teachers ever appointed Teacher of the Year, a National Teacher of the Year. Same way, they didn't know who we were. There was no product in the market, but one conversation with Doug and what he believed in and what he believed we could do with technology to really make an impact, and how any one of these individuals, these great master teachers, could take what they do in a classroom and what might impact hundreds, maybe thousands of kids over their lives, but being able to then apply it to a platform and technology that can reach 50 million kids was something that Doug did really well in terms of bringing people on board and convincing them that they would be part of something bigger and more impactful than they even dreamed of.
Is that part of why you joined? I mean, how did first of all you and Doug connect, and what were some of the things that got you excited about joining Egypt Learning? You've been there now 10 years, 11 years, or how long has it been in total?
Yeah, this is my 11th year.
Amazing.
Yeah, the story of Doug and I connecting is almost as a story of the internet itself. It's a random occurrence. So I had worked at Disney for 11 years. I was in Europe, and I had recently moved back to the U.S. I was doing a lot of consulting work with startups and as well as media companies. At Disney, I'd worked at the intersection of content and new platforms, mobile platform in particular, having headed up Disney Mobile. And, as I looked at what I wanted to do next, I thought education was really interesting. The iPad had just came out. You saw how young children were interacting with the iPad. And just by incredible coincidence, Doug was looking to expand the management team. This was 2013. Still, it was a founder-led team at this point, and he wanted to bring in somebody with a mobile experience. And he was on LinkedIn one day, and my name popped up as people you should know. And Doug got to work.
Look at the LinkedIn algorithm coming through over here.
Wow. And Doug got to work and reached out to our board member, our current chair, Sky Dayton, who happened to know
Earthlings Sky Dayton? Are we?
Earthlings Sky Dayton.
I remember Earthlings. That's just like, wow, small world. So Sky Dayton was actually in our year at USC, the main keynote speaker and talking about Earthling and his experience. Incredibly small world.
Yeah, he's an incredible entrepreneur and known world around now. But yes, he had founded Earthlink, And him and Doug knew each other. He was an early investor in Neopets as well. And Doug had said, hey, he had just joined as an investor and a board member for Age of Learning at this time. And he knew through Young Presidents Organization, YPO, my former president at the Walt Disney Internet Group, Steve Wadsworth. And Doug was like, hey, what do you think of this guy? And he reached out to Steve. Steve reached out to me. And 2 weeks later, I was also convinced that this is what I should be doing, and this should be my future in terms of working in educational technology and moving the ball forward for students everywhere.
Amazing. And at this time, how big was Age of Learning when you joined? Like roughly the size? It sounds like it was still a startup-esque feel, or at what stage was Age of Learning at this time?
I'm employee 92, and we around 500 now. So yes, very much a smaller company at the time.
Incredible. And so what are some lessons that you've learned, like just like things you've learned observing and working with Doug that have kind of been transformative for you as a leader, right? Like a lot of us in general as leaders, we learn by doing, but we also learn from our peers, and we learn from the people that guide and lead us. What are some like important lessons in leadership you've been able to take away from that?
Sure. I would say that, having had an incredible opportunity to start a new business at the Walt Disney Company is what I did at my last job. And, the idea at Disney is that, we sell happiness, and that's fantastic. What coming into an organization, working with Doug, and what's really different from a large company to a smaller one, like Age of Learning and working with an entrepreneurial founder is, I think the drive and urgency to get things done, and that the level of accountability that it's up to you to move the needle. And what really Doug gave me is just a passion for, and I think everybody at the organization that works here just has a passion for doing work that makes a difference, that moves the needle, that not only lifts individual children, but lifts humanity. And the work we do in education could not be more important and Doug always came back to that. And that's why he stressed urgency, not only because of business reasons, but more so because we were losing kids. Kids that did not get the products that we're developing were not going to get what they needed to have a successful life and be successful in terms of their contributions back to society. And to Doug, that was just not acceptable. We had to move faster and better to deliver for these children that deserved more than they were potentially getting in their day-to-day lives. And that's what we love about the work and what he left us with, and a leadership style that will persevere well beyond his time here.
Well, I would 100% agree. I mean, even now, like I look at my son, and then I look at where he is because of the tools and the products. Not only have you guys built, but the whole sector as a whole, right? Like all of that education and the knowledge that he's able to learn on his own, and the education that's been provided for him outside of the classroom, and how it's accelerated his growth. And I'm just one example of many families that I've heard amongst my peers that continue to say that learning doesn't stop. It's no longer learning in the classroom. It's learning at home and learning through the iPad and learning through all the different things out there. So that's incredible. And thank you so much. And that I'm sure Doug's enduring impact has changed lives, and all the work you guys are doing continues to do so. So I want to transition the conversation from here to more of your personal journey. And the way we typically do our podcast is it's really for other leaders and other, VCs and inspiring founders to kind of hear more about leadership and your journey and the things that you've learned along the way. And we try to transition it into 2 or 3 parts. One is like the past, present, and future. So when I get started there, and I know you alluded to how you and Doug kind of connected, but can we talk a little bit prior to that? So like your role at Disney, can you share a little bit about what you were doing there and what your experience was, and kind of allow the groundwork for the listening audience to understand prior to joining Age of Learning, what you were doing at the Walt Disney Company will be helpful.
Sure. And then if you don't mind, I'm just going to go a little bit further back. Just to, I think my life or my career has been really jagged in terms of, and that's a term that Todd Rose uses in his book about the end of average, is that we as humans are jagged. And, Hamlet, I don't know how you grew up, but I certainly grew up as like you went to college, you got a degree, and that's what you did the rest of your life. And, many times I was an immigrant and first generation immigrant. My dad was an accountant. I saw that he made a good living as an accountant. I'm like, I guess I'm going to be an accountant too. It looks promising, and it seems like a good course to take. And that's where I started my career. It provided me a foundation on business, the language of business. What I quickly realized is that I was more interested in the problem-solving piece of it versus just the record keeping, which a lot of what accounting had to do with. So I moved into consulting. Really fortunate to grow up at a time when the internet was taking off. Like yourself, I was getting my MBA at University of Southern California, Marshall School in the full-time employed program. So I was working while I was getting my MBA. And it became really apparent to me that I had to figure out a way to work in the internet effectively. And that landed me at Disney. I was like, had a lot of friends in the entertainment business, and landed me. I was like, wow, entertainment and internet, this sounds awesome. I actually joined Disney in the Go.com group, which was a tracking stock. I don't know.
Go.com, wow.
Back in the days when Disney,
Pasadena, or they were in Pasadena, right? Or
they were based in North Hollywood.
Hollywood, okay.
North Hollywood, yes, and it was they had bought InfoSeek, and so Disney was running a search engine company of all things. In addition to all of the digital properties, including ESPN, Walt Disney properties were all within this the Go.com Walt Disney Internet Group. That quickly blew up like everything else did in 2000, 2001. And that's when I joined them. Fortunately, I was working in the international group. And at that time, in Japan, the spark of what has now become ubiquitous in everybody's pocket, the mobile internet really started with NTT Docomo. They had an iMode service. Disney launched a couple of services on iMode, subscription services way back when. This was...
What year is this? What are we talking about?
2000, 2001.
Wow.
So in the U.S., we were just starting to get color handsets. There was cameras were an external feature on phones, right? You had to actually buy an attachment to take pictures. Crazy. And but this idea of mobiles had started. Japan was taking off. That business ended up being something that I learned a lot about, and then helped expand that across the world. My experience at Disney was I got to do deals with 30 different countries with telcos on how to distribute content like we were doing in Japan. That led to Disney moving me to Europe in 2004 to start a Disney mobile business. Again, this was content distribution through handsets very, very early on. This was ringtone times and wallpapers, right? When that was the business. That quickly evolved into games and more interactive content. And we ended up buying 2 studios, Disney did, and I integrated those studios into the business. My responsibilities were for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. They later expanded to having worldwide responsibilities and building a global business on mobile devices that provided Disney not only reach, but new ways to interact with their customers all over the world. So
this is amazing. Like, Sunil, you had an amazing job. Like you were at like the cutting edge with arguably one of the best companies in the world, working in an incredible opportunity, trailblazing pretty much what became the mobile and all of these different things. And here comes Doug. Comes Doug.
Here comes Doug. I look back to my experience at Disney, which was absolutely phenomenal. I was, getting to green light mobile games at a brand as special as Disney. was a tremendous experience. And as I've already shared, as much as I love that, when Doug came in and said, look, we can change lives, and really not only change lives, but improve lives for children. And this is what I'm about, and this is what I'm doing with ABCmouse. I was like, yeah, sign me up. This sounds like a perfect next step, both because I would worked in interactive children's software with Disney in terms of what we were distributing. I knew mobile really well, but just the idea that I could make a difference and have a purpose-driven career. I did, and at the time I had no idea like how I was, what I was going to do and what that impact was going to look like, and that started, revealing itself over the next, through my time this last 11 years in terms of where we were going to take that. So, going back to my story of being jagged, like, as an accountant, nobody ever, you couldn't have talked to my 22-year-old self and said, hey, Sunil, you're going to work in education, working in innovation, and working on things that are really as impactful as I got to do in this last 11 years. So, I think being curious and taking on new challenges and always wanting to learn and putting yourself as like, hey, I have to embrace learning as a part of my career. There's no whatever I did when I was, in college matters as much. And it matters less now than it did, when you and I went through, and certainly when I went through, but even more so now. You just got to embrace and be curious and say, look, what can I improve? What can I make better for the world? And if you do that, I think you're going to find a lot of success.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. It's having the right mindset, right? Like being curious, asking the right questions, not necessarily having the answers, but being able to, through action or through experiments per se, even for yourself, try to figure out what the right potential answer could be, and all of those different things over time of compounding impacts. And I love hearing that, by the way. And so what I'm hearing from you, and which seems you were in like new industries that were starting to develop. There was really no rules per se, and this was all starting. There was a lot of what ifs. What if this becomes that? What if this becomes how large it could potentially be? Given that, I guess, opportunities or unknowns, how would you go about and evaluating those? Were you always thinking, all right, if this becomes this large, then what does this really mean? Or if this really takes off, because in most of those instances, there were early, right? The infrastructure was not necessarily where it is today, or the users were not where it is today, and so on and so forth. How did you go about thinking that?
And that's probably the biggest difference as you move from a very entrepreneurial environment like Age of Learning and Disney, because of the size and scale, addressable market, or TAM, total addressable market, is something that comes up a lot. Is it a big business? How do we know it's going to be a big business? As an entrepreneur, and things that like Doug would do is like, it'll be a big business because it's a problem that needs to be solved. And then we need to go pull all of those components together so people understand how important this is, so that it becomes what it needs to become in terms of business size. And I would say that was largely a different mindset. The other thing that design thinking and working backwards from what problems exist and then how do you solve for them is I think as you think about purpose-driven careers, and there's a great paper, a Harvard Business Review article from Michael Porter and Michael Kramer on shareholder or stakeholder value or shareholder value. It's really about companies that are going to be the most successful in the future are those that solve the biggest societal problems. And you work backwards from the problem and say, look, this is what the solution needs to be. And then you start working towards that. And that's something I really prescribe to. I 100% believe that. And, as you seek to influence others with your podcast and beyond, that is what is also really fulfilling from a work perspective, is like, I'm doing something, we're doing something that is going to make a difference, that's going to lift up humanity. And I think that is a great way to look at what you want to do with a business if you're an entrepreneur, or where you want to take a business if it's an existing company.
I love that. So you look at the problem and you say, all things aside, if this problem, here's a big enough problem that impacts X amount of people in the world, and if we were to solve this, how would we go about solving it? Even though if the foundation is not necessarily there, and you start breaking it out into little pieces, and then eventually over time, as the foundation grows or the infrastructure comes into place, you're already ready per se with the solution, right? Did I understand exactly what you were kind of saying?
I mean, yeah, you create the sometimes you create the impossible. Like, people will look at a problem and say it's irretractable, and you're like, no, maybe it isn't. Like, what are the look at first principles. Like, where does it start, and then how do I solve for where it starts? How do I solve for where it goes next? And then continue to look at and break down the problem into the components, as you were saying, and then solving for those individually. Oh, let me give you an example. So we had a very, very successful ABCmouse business by 2014, 2015. It was definitely up and to the right. We were doing very, very well. This was just ahead of our fundraising round that we did in 2015 with Iconic Capital, and everything is going really well. And Doug had recommended I go to a conference that was being held at UCLA and on assessments, and it was an academic conference. Learned a lot, and I came back to Doug and I was like, Doug, one of the things I'm hearing repeatedly at this conference and is that there's a real problem from our nation's report card, and it's something that is done through the Department of Education, Institute of Educational Sciences, and every 2 years. And what it finds is that 60% of our kids, by the time they're in 4th grade, are not proficient in reading or math. That's 60% are not proficient.
Wow.
And if you look at it for kids from low income backgrounds, it's 80% are not proficient. And Doug was like, how can that possibly be? And I'm like, here's the data, Doug, look at it. And there's a lot of research and a lot of academics are trying to solve this problem, but everything they're doing is not at scale. And what we have with ABCmouse is a platform with a lot of scale. We know a lot about the kids that use our platform, so we are really in a good position to fix this problem. And Doug was like, Sunil, well, how do we do this? And I go, I don't know. But we know what the problem is, so let's start working backwards from that and bring on a team to do that. And he put me in charge of an R&D project, and this is how I got, I became Chief Innovation Officer. I was heading up strategy at the time. He's like, all right, Sunil, go figure this out. And I got to work with some incredibly brilliant people that I was hiring. And, you asked, like, how do you bring people in? So I took from Doug's playbook and went out and said, look, we want to solve this problem. You have the right skill set. Liz Owen, for example, Dr. Owen, she was working at another company, and I reached out to her and said, look, come here and work with us. We want to solve this problem, and we have the resources and the commitment to do it. She came on board. Diana Hughes, who was already with us. She's a master's from the game school at USC, the best game school in the country.
Yeah.
And I was like, Diana, we need we want to create a game-based platform. We need a great instructional designer. She worked with Tracy Fulton, who was really involved in serious gaming. And Diana's like, of course I want to work on this. And that's how we built that team. And then we continue to expand on it. So a part of that success, and I'd also advise, is hire people that are smarter than you, that know what they want, and that and then align them around a vision and a passion to do something that's, remarkable or different, that really makes it
get out of the way. You let them go at it, right? So this is incredible. So you saw a problem, which was a common problem that was out there at the time, and probably still is, in some elements of it.
Yeah, we haven't solved it yet. We're on the way.
So, and what you said, okay, let's zone in on this problem, and let's look at what we have. We have a platform, we have data. What else can we particularly add that can solve this? And then let alone, I don't know how to do these things. Let me go find the best people in different elements of this and put together an amazing core team. And let's all start thinking through how we potentially could solve it. Am I summarizing that up?
You got it. You got it. And then continue to iterate and assume that what knowledge we have now is only as good as the data we collect, that it's effective. So we're not going this with a preconceived notion of there's a one right answer. The data is going to tell us and we're going to measure that along the way, both in terms of from the very first outset, it was all about, for us, like, is the user experience great? And the only way you can know that, yes, we were all children once, but we're not children anymore. So bring the children in. We have a research lab here that we would bring in thousands of kids, and from first prototype through final design for them to review and tell us, hey, does this work for you? Is it developmentally appropriate? And when I say tell us, they would show us that they could use it, that it made sense to them. And that was, a part of the process that a lot of people were not doing, that they really thought about the learner first, what their needs were, how do you motivate them? We brought in learning scientists like KP Tai, who has her PhD out of UCLA, who really understood cognitive motivation and how to design with learning science in mind. So, these were this bench of people all working together to create a next generation solution, resulted in us having, winning or being rewarded 3 patents on a personalized mastery learning system that we built 2 products on, My Math and My Reading Academy, that we've now have proven works over 13 separate studies that have been aligned with the federal government, requires something called ESSA. We have 13 studies on ESSA that are ESSA aligned that show that they're impactful, that they can make a difference. We've since, as a company, expanded into the schools market. The ABCmouse is historically, we haven't sold it to schools. It was a product that parents bought. We offered it free to schools for teachers to use in their classrooms, but we knew that this product, to have the reach it needed in terms of those 80% of low-income kids who go to our public schools and may not have the money to buy ABCmouse for use at home, that we needed to be in the schools business. And that was, again, Doug was like, all right, let's do this. I mean, yes, it's a completely different business model, selling to the 14,000 districts that are in the U.S., but he's like, let's go do this. And we've hired a fantastic team led by Ty West, who came from, incredible experience, but he wanted to come here because he saw as well that same vision we talked about, like, hey, this is a company that is making a difference, that's doing it right, that has the evidence. We had the goods that we can actually move the needle. And not only did it bring in Ty, it's brought in an incredible team of experienced salespeople who have worked, sales and customer success people who have worked in the schools business, that are going to help continue to expand our impact and improve lives for kids.
That's amazing. So what are some of the things, what are the unique learnings you've learned through the product, right? I'm sure you guys ran a bunch of potentially experiments, you had hypotheses, you said, hey, this would potentially work. And then once you actually put it out there and you're like, well, no, this is not necessarily as effective as we thought. Have you guys had features or things you released that have caught you by surprise? Then you're like, well, we thought this should work, but it actually didn't. And what are some interesting lessons learned from that?
When we started building this, based on our ABCmouse experience, we really focused in on the learners or the students, and that is really important. What we hadn't recognized as we started moving into and deploying it into schools to test it, and you hit a great point there. When I talk about efficacy, the scientific we do scientific research. We use scientific methodology in terms of a control versus a treatment, and looking at the impact of our product as a scientist would for a drug research study in the same way. And through that process, what we learned is that as important as the student experience is for the school system, how do you involve those other humans, those teachers and educators and parents into this learning process? And how do you recognize each child as being unique with their own prior knowledge that they bring in, And that's why this personalized mastery learning was really important for us. But to do that well, you had to create robust experiences for teachers in the classroom so they could see where every child is and how they're performing, and then also provide them the material they need to further differentiate instruction for on a small group basis as well as on an individual child basis. So,
getting to the point of being able to provide personalized teaching so they could see where the child is struggling or is not understanding a particular concept, and also the opposite of that coin, right? Like where someone's doing really, really well, to encourage and reinforce and provide more. Am I understanding it, or?
You hit it on the head. So, we 100%, it was to not only to help those kids that may not be where they need to be to accelerate their learning, but allowing those that may be ahead to continue to do so. And if I may, I'll tell you a little bit about a study we did in Harlingen. This was during the pandemic, with 4-year-olds, and nearly 1,000 of them. And Harlingen is in Cameron, Texas, one of the poorest regions in the country. It's about 30 miles from the border with Mexico. This was early in the pandemic, and I mentioned Dr. Palacios. She knew Carmen Alvarez was our early childhood director at Harlingen. They're like, it's the pandemic, but we still need to get our math instruction for our young learners. Dr. Becky, can you help us? And she's like, yeah. Age of Learning, I know them well. They have a product. We had not had any intent to bring the product to market at this time, but we're like, look, it's a pandemic. We got to help. We have something that we think can help. Let's go out and work with them. We brought the product to market. It was all done remotely. So they had bought tablets for every one of their young learners to use at home. We remotely installed the My Math Academy product onto those tablets, and over the course of the year, the children used it, and the results were absolutely fantastic. 98% of the students that used My Math Academy ended the year on grade level, where they were supposed to be. And this was a pandemic year, so the story was all kids are behind, and there's a problem. And getting to grade level is really important. What we are really excited about is the potential we unlock, because these pre-K teachers did not have the resources to teach first, second, and third grade in their classrooms. When you're a pre-K teacher, you have resources to teach pre-K. So 70% of those kids, and these are, kids that were all getting free and reduced price lunch, or would have been. So, high needs community and high need kids. So a lot of times lower expectations. 70% of those kids were performing at a kindergarten or above level on our program. 20% of those kids were performing at a first grade or above level on that program. And so the potential that we allowed the district to see and the administrators to see is that despite their economic circumstance, there's no limit to their potential if we provide them the resources they need and the materials they need to be able to achieve it. And to me, that is the story that just resonates and is so important, is like, we have this opportunity to unlock incredible amounts of potential among our kids and those furthest from opportunity. And I really do think that's gonna be the tipping point that's gonna allow us as a country and a nation to continue growth, is addressing the needs of those furthest from opportunity.
So you clearly believe it's not nature, but it's nurture, right? Like, that's clear in being able to provide the nurturing environment, being able to provide learning in an accessible, easy way, and let alone fun. When I look at the product and I think about my personal experience, it's amazing how exciting the kids are, or at least my son was, to get on it, right? He wanted it to complete the next course. He wanted to complete the next game. He almost literally saw it as a game. So it's transformational, and talking about impact and all of these great things you guys are having, and to see it real life, you could talk about this, but when it really starts happening, it's a different experience, right? Like, you took on this journey 10 years ago. You're like, hey, one day I'll be able to make an impact. But now here you are, you're seeing it in the studies, and thanks for sharing that, Sunil. It's phenomenal.
Absolutely. And we're just getting started, right? It's continuous improvement. It's data driven. We're in, our programs are AI based, and the opportunity now with generative AI and really recognizing that ecosystem of the learner, the educator, and the parent, and using AI to better direct every one of those inputs for the effect on the student is tremendous, and it really is a game changer. And we'll continue to push with what we have and add new things to it to get even better results as we move forward.
So we're kind of alluding to the future. We've been talking about the present, and we've been talking about some of the amazing things you guys are doing. Where do you see learning evolving to, right? Like now it's no longer will people use an iPad and learn. We're past that stage. Or no longer will people learn online. We're way past that stage, right? Where do you see the transformation, particularly for younger learners, going, and where do you see education evolving to in the next, let's say, 5 years or so?
The platforms that we've created, like this personalized mastery learning platform, and I know you asked specifically for younger learners, I think it's pretty universal that what our future platforms are going to do is recognizing the lived experiences and the knowledge that our learners are bringing onto the platform, and that's the personalization piece. The context for learning, and whether this be higher ed or for younger kids, is like the responsibility has shifted so that it used to be, and you hear this a lot in higher ed, like professors taking, great pride in failing half the class. And as educators, that is not our job. Our job is to get every single learner to where they need to be successful. And whether that be as a young learner or in healthcare, teaching the next doctors and nurses, we shouldn't be looking at, classes that fail them. It's like, how do we help them get to where they need to be so that they can be, achieve their dream and a need, right, that we have in terms of a lot of different industries that are understaffed. And the data that's going to come out of that learner experience and what they do when it then is used to optimize the human interaction. Now, I think the human remains the teacher, the more knowledgeable other, if it's a peer or a parent, depending on the situation, is also important. And their role and goal will be optimized to what, an individual needs and small groups need based on where they are in their learning journey. And the programs themselves will promote persistence with behavioral mechanics that really help a learner feel confident that they're moving in the right direction, and that, this system is there to help them get there. And they're not doing this alone, and they're part of this community. And it'll open up. And one of the things that we didn't talk about, like, in addition to getting the efficacy results we've had, what we've seen consistently for the teachers is they've fed back that the programs that we've created, My Math and My Reading Academy, not only are helping the child learn what they need to learn in the classroom, but we're helping them feel more confident about learning. We're helping them feel more motivated about it and identifying themselves as a learner. And that to at a young age, that's critical, but it needs to continue. There's, and this whole idea of growth mindset is what we set out to do, is that, you may not know something now, but through learning, you can overcome. That's a short-term challenge because you have the capacity as a learner to overcome that non-knowledge through effort and persistence. And with the right tools, you'll get there. And that's a universal story. And I think that's what you're going to see. And, AI in terms of driving, that's not only a co-pilot for a learner or a student, but a co-pilot for a teacher in terms of how to be more effective for each of the learners in their classroom. The same for a parent or a peer that may also be experiencing, that learning with that learner together, right? It's everybody can contribute to this ecosystem of just in ways that we.
Man, you had my mind going so many amazing places. I'm seeing like a future where different techniques for different students. Oh, this person is able to understand the concept this way, so it learns over time. That you're like, all right, if I show examples or these type of examples, this is much more clear for this particular student. And if I show these type of examples, it's much more clear for this type of student. These are incredible, man. These are all exciting things, and it's phenomenal that I know coming from you, like it will happen. So it's not one of those that these are like pipe dreams that will we ever get there. The team behind your company and all the great people there, you guys are definitely actively working on this, and it's really exciting to hear. What, in all like ways, shapes, and form, where do you see, like, we all talk about AI, right? It's common now, it's everywhere, right? Do you see the transformational change that's going to have on education as a whole? Like, do you feel, is it as bad as the calculator when it first came out, and then people are like, well, what do I need to learn math? Like, where are we in that world, at least on the teacher side of things and on the student side of things? And I could personally talk about it as like, I'm embracing it and teaching my son about it, right? Like, I'm showing him how to use ChatGPT and he laughs at it. He's like, Dad, that's cheating. You can't just go in there and ask it questions. But where do you see all of this change happening, and where do you see all that taking place in terms of education?
You know what? It's in our company, we've embraced it completely as well. We work with OpenAI as one of they care a lot about education as well, as do the other platforms out there. The big change that we've seen in terms of AI with ChatGPT in particular is the language interface, right? It's natural language interface, and it's such a game changer, because now we, as mere mortals without any coding knowledge, can go in and benefit from an incredible language model that they've created, a large language model, and that in itself is getting so many more people curious and starting to work with that technology. The approach from a company perspective is like, we're embracing it across the board, and a lot of that has to do with productivity. What can we do better because now and faster, because we can use an AI, and it could be even simple things is like, how could I do a better performance review quicker with maybe an AI starting point and then doing the editing. What it really helps solve is a blank page problem, because you can go to it with certain prompts and certain background and say, organize this a certain way, and then you use your knowledge of a specific domain to make it better, because it does hallucinate. The results are not going to be always what you want, but it really does help you start with, like, I don't have to start with a blank page. I can start with some background, get something written up for me in the voice of whatever voice I need, right? If I need a McKinsey consultant expert on my side and say, all right, write this that way, I can do that. And then that it's a good starting point. And then you apply your own knowledge to it and you make it better. Going back, it's all about ecosystems around learning. And I think this is what's really exciting, is that we are going to be able to use student data and their experience as they're going through learning using digital platforms like the ones we've developed, and there'll be others that are then, they feed in to this idea of like, how can I be better if I'm a teacher at instruction based on what I know about every student in my class? And what data can I collect that feeds back into the system? And then you do the same with parents or caregivers or peer groups, depending on the age of the child. And now we're collecting multiple data inputs that then look at, what it does in terms of an individual learner, and then across scale, multiple learners. And you start creating this a flywheel of effect that the models can learn from one another. And like, look, if you do this action with a student that has typically performed like X, you're going to get better results, because that's what they typically react to. You can start seeing that efficiency. And the other thing I think that's really interesting is that it'll always, I feel like, always a job of technology to elevate the role of the human that is supporting a learner. So the more we can do with technology, and then we can look at more elevated roles for the human, then and that's the teacher or the parent or again, the peer, the better the outcomes are going to be. And I think that is, and also the more reach you can have with those outcomes. Like, we assume the model is what it is in the U.S. with teachers that are highly educated. If you go to certain parts of the world, there's no availability of teachers. A lot of times the teachers don't even have a third grade education themselves. We can also elevate what is happening for those students as much as we can through the learnings that we have in, for example, in our U.S. school system. So like this opportunity not only to make an impact in the U.S., but globally, I think just grows, and AI is just going to be an incredible enabler.
Sunil, man, you've got me excited, and I could see Doug's lasting impact clearly on you. I'm ready. I'm ready for the future and all the amazing things you've done. Thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you. We've explored the innovative journey of Age of Learning and reflected on the ending legacy of Doug Dohring today. Remember, the journey of learning and innovation is perpetual, and the impact one visionary leader can have is boundless. Thank you, Sunil, again, for sharing all your experiences and insights, and thank you for our listeners for joining us today. If you found value in this conversation, please leave us a review and subscribe for more episodes with industry leaders. This has been the Growth Ventures Podcast with your host, Hamlet Azarian. Until next time, stay inspired and keep innovating. Thank you.